Imagine they're 65 and they're fixing to retire. I need a few people to take a guess at how much they think they would need to comfortably retire.
At least a month.
Okay. Any other guesses? 5 million? All right.
2 million.
2 million? All right. Those are all pretty good guesses. But really, it kind of just depends on what you would consider comfortably living. I mean, some people need $50,000 a year to retire. Some people want $100,000 a year to retire. Some people want $200,000 a year. So it kind of just depends. But the sad fact is there's about 33% of Americans that have $0 saved for retirement. In the same manner, only about 39% of Americans could cover a $1,000 emergency if they had one today. Since there's an obvious financial problem among American families, the best solution to bringing the country out of financial turmoil has to be educating the next generation. In order to do that, let's take a look at the school system. In order to understand the modern school system, let's take a look at how it was created. Back in 1902, John D. Rockefeller, who is generally known as the richest man to ever live, donated about $129 million to create the General Education Board. Adjusted for inflation, this contribution would be equivalent to about $3 billion today. Since Rockefeller made this enormous donation, he was given a say in what and how the kids would be taught. This becomes very concerning when you realize that he didn't want a nation of stinkers, but rather a nation of workers. This makes sense because he wanted workers for his company. However, this decision has caused over a century of financial illiterate common Americans. With that being said, let's take a look at a few basic financial concepts that need to be taught in schools. First, we could teach credit cards, credit scores, debt, the power of investing early, and basic budgeting skills, just to mention a few. First, we'll take a look at the importance of credit cards and your credit score. In short, a credit score is a numerical value that measures an individual's likelihood to pay back their debt on time and in full. Your credit score becomes very important when it's time to take out home loans or any kind of loan for that matter. The higher your credit score is, the lower your interest rates will be on those loans. In the long run, your high credit score will result in the borrower saving thousands of dollars. So as you can see here, this is like kind of a range of like what different credit scores would be. And the average is 711, which is down here, which is a pretty good credit score. But you ideally want to get down here in this excellent 750 to 850 range to get basically the best interest rates possible. And these three companies are the main three that basically evaluate your credit score, and they look for like length of credit history, different like if you have a credit card, if you're taking out loans, how well you pay back on time, it's different things like that. Similarly, we have credit cards, which can be useful in earning rewards and building your credit score. However, they do come with a downfall because many Americans don't have the self-control to use them properly. As you can see here, there are about 45% of American families that carry credit card debt, and there's a total of $807 billion in outstanding credit card debt in America today. And the average family household has about $6,720 in credit card debt. These astounding facts further prove that Americans need financial education in order to get them off the path of living in debt from generation to generation. With that being said, let's take a deeper look into debt. Generally, debt is perceived as something that you want to avoid at all costs. However, taking debt from mortgages isn't necessarily bad and or avoidable because the majority of people don't have the money to pay for a house in full. The only other possible exception for taking on debt is potentially starting a business. As I said before, the most important debt to avoid is credit card debt due to the high interest rates. Recently, student loan debt has become a very big issue that is putting a large burden on millennials. Currently, there's about $1.61 trillion in outstanding student loan debt. I believe schools need to teach students that going to a four-year university isn't always the right path for them. It is very important to figure out if the debt you're going into is going to be worth it when you get your job. So like, if you're going to go into $100,000 of student loan debt, you're going to get a job that pays $45,000, it might not be worth it. And you need to look into that and just make sure you're making the right decision before you do it. The next concept that I believe needs to be taught in school is the power of investing early. The most important thing I've learned while researching this concept is that time in the market is key to growing significant wealth. The difference between investing at the age of 20 and waiting till you're 30 can make the differences of hundreds of thousands and even millions of dollars in some cases. As you can see here, Jack started investing when he was about 20 years old, and Blake started when he was about 30 years old. And assuming they invest the exact same amount every single month, when they turn 67, Jack will have about $2.5 million and Blake will have 1.4. So basically 10 years is the difference of $1.1 million when you go to retire, which is very significant because that can control like how much you get to spend when you're retired. Lastly, I think basic budgeting skills is a concept that has to be taught in school. I know it sounds generic, but you got to spend less than you make. While this may not sound cliche, it is something that is an issue for many Americans. The problem is what leads to billions of dollars in credit card debt that I mentioned before. I'll be honest, I've noticed that budgeting can sometimes be a difficult thing since there's always unexpected costs that will come up each month. If possible, it is always best to leave room in your budget for these costs. Another surprising cost that always hits Americans is property tax. At the end of the year, you're required to pay taxes on your house, land, cars, boats, and many other things you own. This cost is one that catches many off guard. Likewise, taxes in general can be a very confusing and complicated concept that needs to be taught in schools, but I decided not to focus on it because it is a very hard and complex concept to explain in such a short presentation. In close relationship to taxes, let's take a look at how the government spends our money. When it comes to retirement, many people rely on Social Security as a way to help fund their needs. In fact, the government spent about $1.1 trillion on Social Security last year alone, making it the most funded program in the United States year after year. While Social Security has been a beneficial program for millions of retirees over the years, it could have been a very avoidable program if students were taught how to set their own selves up for retirement. If Social Security was non-existent, American taxpayers could see their taxes drastically reduced and put trillions of dollars back into American pockets every year. Since we can't go back in time and change the educational system, I think the time is now to set up change or make change and set up future generations for prosperity. Like I've said throughout the presentation, education has to be the most logical solution to fixing the financial crisis that is controlling millions of Americans. But let's take a closer look at how we should structure this plan. So my proposed plan, based off the research I've done over this issue, is that we could start teaching kids basic financial concepts in first grade and build them all the way up until they graduate. It would be very similar to the way we teach math. You learn basic skills when you're young, and you continually build off of those skills as you get older. The only difference is financial skills would be much more applicable in real life situations when you get older. With that being said, I'd like to take some time to give my personal experiences from my time at SCS. I'd like to preface by saying that I'm very appreciative for the last 16 years that I've spent at Southside, and I feel like I've been prepared in so many ways for real life situations. However, I do feel like the school has let me down and my classmates down when it comes to practical issues like financial literacy. Other than a few short weeks in economics with Ms. Bowers, I can't recall any other classes or lessons that taught me anything that would be helpful in making financially wise decisions when I get into the real world. I think the school should at least consider implementing some of these ideas into their curriculum. These ideas would not only increase the value of a Southside Christian school education, but it would set up its graduates for a life of financial success and stability. Now that we've taken a practical view of why we need financial management classes, let's take a look and see what the Bible has to say. The first verse I took a look at was Proverbs 22:6, which says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, even when he is old, he will not depart from it." Generally, this verse is kind of a cornerstone of why parents should teach their children Christian values. However, I think it can also be applied to teaching our children to be financially wise. This verse helps further prove my point that financial literacy should be taught in schools because parents aren't always able and or knowledgeable enough to educate their own children on these matters. Especially as a Christian school, we should consider the truth God has given us and put it into practice. The second verse I took a look at was Proverbs 21:5, which says, "The plans of the diligent lead to profit, as surely as haste leads to poverty." This verse definitely exemplifies the basics of money management. The Lord is plainly saying that if you are careful and plan out your finances, you will become wealthy. After talking to my family's financial advisor, I've definitely found that planning ahead is the key aspect to creating substantial wealth. On the other hand, if you're quick and hasty to make decisions, you will likely become poor and impoverished. Likewise, my financial advisor severely warned against making uneducated and hasty decisions. I think this verse shows the importance of planning, but more importantly, putting your faith in God. And my last verse I took a look at was Proverbs 13:22. A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. This verse shows the importance of saving and being financially wise with what God provides. He makes it very clear that we ought to be diligent and bless our children and grandchildren. However, I don't believe that God bases success off of how much money we accumulate over the years. I personally think that God will provide plenty if we're faithful to Him. Overall, it would be my hope to see financial management classes taught nationwide, but now I'd be satisfied that SES would implement these ideas and do their part in ending the financial crisis that has taken the lives of millions of Americans. Thank you.
All right. Well done, Garrett. We have lots of guests, lots of panelists here, so I want to open it up to you. If you have any comments or questions for Garrett, please ask.
I totally agree with you, Garrett, that you would let you and your classmates down and not having a personal finance class here. I think that wholeheartedly. I wish I had that when I was a kid. I made a lot of mistakes when I was newly married. Got behind an 8 ball here and there. I'm in really good shape now, but if I had had that training myself, I wouldn't have made those mistakes in the first place. It does take self-control, certainly. You can teach people what they need to do, but fall short. That was an excellent presentation. You covered a watershed of topics, and I think you were thorough without going into too much information.
In your research, were there any states that currently require financial?
Yeah, I saw that there's a third of the states that require financial. It's it's one class basically. The majority of them just require one class, which it gives a good overview of it, but it's not really an in-depth, a whole first grade to 12th grade thing that I'm kind of thinking of. Which I kind of come up with that idea because if you start teaching them that early, then it's just kind of ingrained in their brain that they should be doing this, and then when they get older, it's just it's normal to them. So that.
Hey, Garrett, what's your opinion about Social Security? Will it be around for your generation?
I don't think
so. The government spending against it.
Yeah, I highly doubt it. That's why, even now, I feel like Social Security shouldn't be something you rely on. It should be almost like a bonus. When you go to retire, you should have what you need to retire, what you know you need to retire, and just take Social Security as a bonus, basically. But yeah, I highly doubt that we'll have it when we go over. So we need to be prepared if we're going to have it.
How about the college level? Did you see anything about how many colleges offer courses for non-business majors?
I didn't really do the college part. I think it's a good idea that all majors should at least have to take some classes, but I was mainly focused on just school, elementary to high school.
Did you find anything about, when I was in college, they rolled out credit cards the first day of orientation. The first day of class, you go on, all these clubs are here, but then they wanted to hand out credit card applications. They still do that?
I think so, yeah.
Beware.
Yeah. That's what, I tried to point that out, credit cards aren't inherently bad. If you have the self-control to use them, they can get cash back, travel points, this and that, but a lot of Americans just don't have the self-control to use it properly.
Garrett, you touched on the concept of good debt. Did your research indicate what types of things would be considered good debt?
Yeah, well, I guess it depends on who you ask, because I did some Dave Ramsey stuff, and he's completely, he's pretty much anti-debt, and then there's other people that are fine with taking out debt on businesses and home loans, but pretty much taking out car loans, that was pretty much a big no, and I don't know, there's this thing called leveraging your debt, which is kind of a hard concept to explain, but that's a good thing to do.
Garrett, did your research take you into any, the difference between appreciating assets and depreciating assets?
I kept it pretty simple. I didn't want to get too in depth because I knew some people just kind of bore them too much.
Can you unpack the idea a little bit more, or to the extent that you studied it? You mentioned something about calculating the risk, college costs, and related to. Can you just off the cuff share more of your thoughts on that?
There's a lot of. I feel business, taking a business major is a really popular idea. A lot of people like to do that, and a lot of people go for management or marketing. And I honestly feel that's kind of a waste of your 4 years because unless you're going to college for a real specific engineering or like I chose to do finance, which I feel like that's pretty specific and I can get a job for that. But like a lot of people go for like just random stuff that they don't really know if they can get a well-paying job for. And I just think you just need to like think about what you're doing before you go to college and just like assess the risk of like, is this $75,000, $100,000 in debt going to be worth it when I graduate and I'm only making $50,000 a year? But if you're making $200,000 a year, then maybe it's worth it because you can pay back the student loans, your education.
Garrett, did you come across any articles or anything related to just sort of consumerism, materialism, and relation to debt and credit and all that?
Yeah, I mean, I've read where like really the credit card companies kind of do that. Like they advertise like all these bonuses, like you get this, you get that, you get this, and they kind of take advantage of the average American because they don't understand that like, yeah, I get it now, but I mean, I got to pay for that later. So they're kind of taking advantage of it.
Is that like the Delta Sky Miles card? Like you want to spend more money on cards?
Yeah.
So you can get like.
So I mean, that's kind of I guess that's their process. So like, I get this many miles or I get this much cash back, so maybe I should just spend more and then I can get more cash back. But really, you got to go to the mindset of like, I'm already going to spend this money, so let's just go ahead and use it on a credit card. But I'm not going to spend any more than I would if I'm using cash.
It's like spending money to save money, which doesn't.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
Go ahead, Farrah.
Did you do anything about like making payments on stuff, like if you want something now, but you make monthly payments for it,
I mean,
or like yearly payments for it? Do you have
For
to do
like
that?
what?
Like a car, or
Like, well, I mean, that's
like
kinda-
obviously you're not
like,
gonna buy a car or like a house, but
I mean, a lot of the research I said is like for your first car, you need to be able to pay cash for it, and then really just be able to pay cash for your own car. It's like taking out car loans. It's not really. I mean, it's not a bad thing to do, but it's not really a smart thing to do. I
what
mean,
about the afterpay? Have you ever heard like if you go on like a shopping app and then they have like the afterpay thing where it's like if it's $100 you can pay like $25 for 4 months.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I feel like if you can't afford something right now, you should probably be buying it. Honestly. Even if it's 0% interest. I mean, if you can't afford it, you probably shouldn't be buying it.
Like it's not.
If you can't cough up the money, you probably should. Probably shouldn't be buying it.
Garrett, you shared a couple verses from Proverbs, which were really, really helpful. Were there any other passages, even if you don't know the reference, or just a phrase that came to your mind that would sort of?
I mean, I know there's a lot of verses about being like greedy with your money, and I mean, the way I kind of presented it, it's all about making wealth for yourself, but I think giving is also a very important thing. And when you accumulate wealth like this, then you have the ability to give, but if you're always in debt, you don't have the ability to give like God told us to. So I feel like just being like diligent and making money for yourself allows you to be able to give and do what God says.
So like, I heard what you just said on like the car lease thing.
Yeah.
So like, do you think that's bad? Like, do you think everything's supposed to be paid for like straight cash? Like, because like everybody ain't gonna get it.
It's kind of. I mean, it's difficult. It's like.
A lot of places don't even take cash.
So if I could interject, because I think Mr. Votter said something yes, it's a little difficult of an idea, but I think it answers a lot of these immediate questions. The difference between paying for something that has appreciable value and depreciable value, like things that when you buy them and hang on to them for a while, some things actually go up in value, like a home. The reason why a lot of financial investors and stuff, they don't mind you investing in real estate, because historically real estate or houses anyways, I know that we've had, housing crisis, but the reason why it was a crisis is because so many folks had planned on their home going up in value. And so borrowing money against it, worst case scenario, you sell your house and pay off that debt. A car, if you buy a brand new car, the moment you drive it off a lot, it loses about $3,000 in value. And then every year that and that's a nice car. Every year that you own it, those cars go down in value. So borrowing money to buy a car, Dave Ramsey talks a lot about this, right? Like a lot of people owe more money on their car than it's worth. is that a good, and TJ, like, it's not really a matter of right or wrong at that point. Is that a good idea to borrow money against something that you're going to owe more money than the car is actually worth? Is that a good idea or bad idea? I mean, it's just not prudent, right? It's not necessarily even a moral thing. It's just not wise. And that's what that type of education would teach you.
You're losing value in the car, and you're paying the interest on the loan you're taking out. So you're like double losing.
Right. Right.
So like TJ said, if you pay cash for it, like if you pay cash for a car, you can't build up your credit score. You know what I mean? So like, should they track if you pay with cash to pay it off, so that they can say, oh, like they're good, they give money, like you don't have to worry about them, so you can buy a house one day.
There's other things you can do to build up your credit
Yeah, like-
score without going into it.
Yeah, your credit card helps go.
Utility bills, going towards your credit score, and everything.
Yeah, but it's like, don't-
So like what you were saying about how like the credit card companies themselves push you to be like have the consumer mentality. That's the same with credit score. I think that's the same with credit scores. So they like advertise that it's a good thing to have a high credit score, which it can be if you're buying a house. But then like ideally would not want a high credit score because that means you don't have to take out a loan.
Because like, I guess in a perfect world,
But they push
if you had the money, you wouldn't need the credit score. But like, I mean, really, I've researched like credit cards. Like, in order to get a higher credit score from your credit card, it's actually better to spend less on your credit card.
Yeah.
Because you're like less of a risk to the credit card company, like as a borrower. So spending like,
So it's not
you
necessarily.
really need to spend less on your credit card every month in order to.
So is it just that it's not necessarily how much you're paying back, it's just that you're paying it back?
They just want to see that you're paying it back all the time.
But it goes both ways. If I have a credit card with $20,000 limit and a $1,500 balance that I'm faithfully paying my $129 a month or whatever, and it's going to take me 7 years to pay that off because of the interest rate. If I go to apply for a new car loan or a home loan or a small business association administration loan to buy a business, the bank is going to view that as a liability because I may buy a $100,000 house and then go max out my credit card up to $20,000 buying new furniture and TVs and stuff to fill it up. And so it's a double-edged sword. There's not a right or wrong related to should I get a loan or pay down something regularly to get a credit score. It takes both. You want to show the bank that you're in a position to regularly pay your bills, but you don't have this sort of big list of liabilities that you could all of a sudden go spend a whole bunch of money that you can't cover.
I have to agree with your understanding of the usefulness of a financial management class. I felt like it was like the first class in a long time I felt like I might be most likely to take out. Well, there's two questions. One, at what age do you think we should start teaching them about?
I propose like first grade because I mean first grade you learn basic math skills. So if you can learn that 20 minus 10 equals 10, then you should learn that if you're making $300 a month, let's say, and you're spending $350 a month, you're always taught that you can't have a negative, so that's not good when you're in first grade.
And two, what do you think about some nations that have gone cashless, like Sweden? And I think maybe Finland. There are some nations in the world that have tried.
I mean, I know that like I've seen where like the United States is at least like thinking about the idea, but I don't know. I'm not sure about that. It's definitely a possibility. It's probably going to happen soon, but I don't know.
Garrett, I think a lot of, all of my questions got asked already, which is good. That means we're all pretty much on the same page on this. One thing I did want to not really ask about, but maybe if you can add to, I really loved how a lot of your project isn't so much about like the whole thing about starting in first grade. Yeah. It's not so much about just piling in some information that this is how credit scores work and this is how loans work and so on, and like different loans, what they're called and whatnot. A lot of it just goes not so much about information, but like charactered habits of delayed gratification, that I want this now, I don't have the resources to have it right now. And so when someone promises it for me right now, that's tough, right? Like, so could you speak to that a little? Like, what you're calling for isn't so much about information, but what?
Like I was saying to her, I mean, like, if you cram it all into one course, or even like the 4 years of high school, that's better than nothing. But like, I feel like if you span it out at a young age like that, kids are learning and they're processing stuff. And if you ingrain in their head, like, this is how you do it, this is how you do it, and they're learning that their whole life, and it's stuck in their head. Because I mean, really, money like being wise with money is really it's like a mindset kind of. It's not about what you know. I mean, it's helpful to know stuff, but it's a mindset of just like, I got to do this. I got to do this. I mean, so.
But at the same, I mean, I've known people that are just old school. They don't know like all the ins and outs. But my grandmother and my grandfather, they paid for their house in cash, and it's like that wasn't too terribly. That was a while ago, but it wasn't too terribly long ago. And now it's like that's an asset that my dad is relying on. And so like the future generation thing, it's like it allows like all of this stuff allows you to be the type of person, the type of charactered person to where folks aren't, you're not a liability to someone else, you're an asset to someone else. You're providing for other people now.
It's nice to know that when you die, you could leave however many millions of dollars. Because ideally, when you retire, you don't want to ever like go into that.
Savings?
No, like
Principal?
your principal. You have like $2.5 million when you, but ideally you should be making like the average S&P every year is 10.5%. So you're pulling out say 4.5%, and you're never touching that principal, and it's growing. So then when you die and give it to your kids, they have $5-6 million, and then they're set up, and then they can do it for their kids, and then you just start a generation of wealth.
Yeah, man.
To speak to that, I think there's a stat. There's like good money management. It's like 80% behavior and 20% knowledge.
Yeah, that's what I was. So that's my idea behind just creating the behavior aspect of it throughout the whole. Because if you wait till high school, I mean, you know how kids are in high school. They're not going to listen. They don't care.
Well, like I thought about that even when Mrs. Bowers asked about the college thing. It's like, yeah, college. That'd be really cool to like pick up a course here and there on financial management. It'd be really cool for colleges but by that point in time, you've made one of the biggest financial decisions you've ever made, if not the biggest financial decision, namely your college loan. Like, yeah, it's crazy. Cool. Any other thoughts, questions? All right.
You did a great job.
Great job, Garrett.
Thank you.